Amen. Well, the craziest thing happens every year, the week after Christmas. The fine citizens of San Clemente leave perfectly good firewood out on their curb by their trash cans. And so when I was in high school, me and my friends seized the opportunity frequently, and we would go around with my pickup truck and gather Christmas trees and throw them in the back of my truck, as many as would fit, and then make our way down to the beach, where we would then proceed to light the trees on fire in the bonfire pits, of course. But have you ever seen an old, dead, dry Christmas tree go up in flames? It's a beautiful thing. It's a beacon of light, right? And when you take one tree and place it in the middle of the fire pit and stand back and behold the beacon of light, that's one thing. But when you then throw the 7 other trees that you have with you in the same fire pit, things get wild, right? You can see this beacon of light from outer space. And apparently, some of the people who live up on the hillside there over T Street didn't like it one year, and so they called the fire department. And so I know I've got some friends here who, probably are not happy when these kinds of things happen. So I apologize to you, my friends. But that was some of the stuff that I did in high school. And so you know how that goes. You take a big fire and you throw some fuel at it, makes a bigger flame. Of course, not everything you throw into a fire is going to make a bigger flame. You take a wet blanket, you throw it on the fire, it's going to put it out. You're camping and your children throw green leaves or trash into the fire. It's not going to add fuel to the fire. And in our relationship with our spouse, we have the opportunity to do one or the other of these things. We can throw things into the fire of our relationship that fuel the passion, that fuel the affection, that grow our love for one another. And we can also say things and do things that effectively throw a wet blanket on the relationship. And what we get to look at today in the Song of Solomon is this couple throwing good fuel in the fire and providing for us an example of this kind of love that's responsive to the other person in the relationship, and it fuels the relationship, and one person's love toward the other fuels it back, and it grows and expands. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, Solomon, I don't know if you talked about this last week, but Solomon, the author, was not the most perfect husband in the world. He's got an ugly resume in a number of ways, but he's not writing an autobiography in the Song of Solomon. He's writing a poem, and he's projecting this couple. And as a man who had wisdom, God-given wisdom, and copious amounts of it, he's writing a poem for us that paints a picture of an ideal couple in many ways, that love each other well and that serve as models for us. And so I would invite you to, again, open your Bibles to the book of Song of Solomon. We're looking at chapter 2 this week, and I want to challenge you to love each other, love your spouse in a way that fuels your spouse's love for you. Okay? And so if we start reading there in verse 1, she says, kind of picking up where she left off in the previous chapter, she says, I'm a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. And if we just stop right there, this is where, again, understanding some of the cultural context and the historical circumstances around this Hebrew love poetry is really helpful, because what she says here kind of fits with her comment earlier about being insecure with her appearance. And she says here, I am a very ordinary looking flower. I am like one of the flowers. There's thousands of them out in the field. I'm just like one of those. Very super ordinary, non-extraordinary flower. But look at his response. A lily among the brambles, so is my love among the young women. Do you see what he's saying to her? She says, I'm just an ordinary lily. And he says, well, if you're a lily, then everyone else is a bramble. If you're an ordinary flower, everyone else is a weed. The way I see you, you stand out among all the other women. You are my favorite. You are beautiful. I have eyes for you. That's the message that he sends to her. She is his prized jewel. Now, I basically tell my kids every day something to that effect about their mom. It's just this thing that I've gotten into in our home, and I'll say something pretty much every single day, right? I don't know. And the kids now just like roll their eyes or say ew, or they smile and say, we know that you think that, Dad, right? But I still say it. Got to tell them. Got to remind them. Your mom is the most beautiful person in the world. And this morning, I wasn't thinking about this sermon, or I don't know. I was pulling out of the driveway, leaving our house to take 2 kids to school, and Bethany was walking up the driveway. I don't know why you were walking up the driveway, but as she walks by, I said to the 2, your mom is drop dead gorgeous, right when she walks by. And they look at her and they're like, and then she continues to walk up to the top of the driveway, and she's like waving and actually kind of like dance waving to the kids as we pull away. And I rolled the window down and said, by the way, it's trash day. And then I hit the gas and pulled out of there. But that's just ordinary conversation, right? And when I got back, guess what? All the cans were down on the curb. So that was this morning. But I want to send that message to her every day and make it a point to send that to her for the kids to know that that's what I think and that's how I feel. And so they've heard me say it at least 1,000 times. And look in the text. So that's what he says. And I just love that line. That's one worth remembering here. That's an easily memorable verse. As a lily among the brambles, so is my love among the young women. I love that one. But look at what she says then in response to him in verse 3. She says the same thing back, basically. She uses a different metaphor, but she says, as an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. And so she says, well, looking at the forest of ordinary forest trees, I don't know, I'm not an arborist. Garrett, you could tell me what all the ordinary trees of the forest might be, but there in the middle, there's an apple tree. There's one apple tree. It's producing fruit. It's producing delicious fruit. It's got a big canopy and it's got shade. It's a healthy apple tree, and that's what she says about him. All the other guys are like ordinary trees in the forest, and you are the apple tree. And I think I make a point to say things like this to Bethany every week, and you know what? She fires right back too. And she's probably the kids have probably heard her say something back to me, or she'll initiate the comment no less times. And so we have that kind of exchange in our family where she'll say some kind of compliment to me. And, I had a lot more hair when we started dating and the compliments started, but they keep coming. And I appreciate her for that. So you look at this kind of response and the way they talk to each other and the way they treat each other, and it's good. It's exemplary. And so I just think we should pause and learn a lesson here from this song, that we need to have this kind of perspective about our spouse. We need to look at our spouse and affirm that we see them as a lily among the brambles and as an apple tree among the forest. We need to cultivate eyes for our spouse. And you can remember back to last week, what was it that was attractive to each other for this couple? It was the person. It was the character. It was who they are. They get to know each other, and they love what they see, what they know, who the person is. And we need to develop that kind of exclusive, special relationship where we know our spouse and we continue to know them at deeper and deeper levels the longer we are married to them. We have a relationship with them that we don't share with anyone else, and it's special, and we need to cultivate it and develop this kind of responsive love, okay? So that's just the first couple of verses, but there's a lot more here if you want to add fuel to the fire in your relationship. Oh, did I give you point number 1? I did not. I asked you that last week, and you told me yes, and now I'm starting to wonder if I can believe you. Number 1 was to prize your spouse above all others. Prize your spouse above all others. That's the first couple of verses that we just read. Okay? The second point is to then build security in your relationship. Build security. So if you keep reading, you'll see that the kind of relationship they have with one another is not just talk. They don't just say nice things about each other. They really think nice things about each other, and they've learned to trust each other. They've built up this trust and confidence in their relationship so that it's strong and fortified. So it goes on where in the second part of verse 3, she says, "With great delight I sat in his shadow," thinking about him as an apple tree. "With great delight I sat in his shadow, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love." The message that she's sending here is that she feels protected and provided for by this man. She can sit under his protection, under the shade of his tree, protects her from the sun, protects her, provides a nice environment for her to be in, and the fruit of the tree that she sits under provides her with sustenance and nutrients, and it's a delight, it's sweet to her taste, so she willingly and happily sits under his provision. Now, there are metaphors in the Song of Solomon, and you may read this one and wonder, like, is she getting at a sexual metaphor here? I don't think yet, okay? She's saying that I love your provision for me. And then she goes on, because this thing's going to continue. She now takes it into a public setting. He brought me into the banqueting house. Okay, the banqueting house it says the house of wine, and it's this kind of public setting, and what she says is he puts a banner of love over me. So in the presence of all the people that have been invited to this kind of public feast, probably this pre-wedding feast, the message that he sends about her to all the people is love. He makes her feel safe, he takes care of her, he provides for her. That's what's going on in these first few verses here. And then her language does get a little more spicy at this point. She says, "Sustain me with raisins." Now, you didn't know that was a pickup line, but in the Song of Solomon, it is, okay? I don't know what it is about raisins. I don't know why those were the special love potion, but it sounds like it is. "Sustain me with raisins. Refresh me with apples." Another one, right? "For I am sick with love. His hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me." And so again, I do think they're in a public setting, but her words are suggestive here. It could mean, cause me to lie down in raisins and spread me out on apples, all right? We're just starting here. Wait till we get to chapter 4, my friends, okay? So she says this, and I think the wedding comes later in the book, and so they're just talking to each other at this point. They can't resist talking to each other like this. She can't resist talking to him like this. She wants to pounce on him. And guys, when we hear this, "Sustain me with raisins, spread me out on the apples," it's like, how do I get my wife to want to pounce on me, right? And one answer to that question is to look at how he treats her. I mean, just look at the way he's treating her in this book so far. He treats her like she is the diamond in the rough, right? She is the most precious thing in the universe. He says it to her. He says it about her. He says it to other people. He protects her. He provides for her. She feels safe with him. And all these things add up until she starts saying stuff like that. And she's got to hold herself back. And his arm, in verse 6, his arms are maybe wrapped around her, but like I said, I think they're still at this kind of wedding feast before the actual ceremony. The wedding, the marriage has not been consummated yet. Okay? And then she says something in verse 7 where she addresses probably people in the public setting. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. And so here's a message that she sends to other eligible women saying, wait until the time is right. Hold back until love awakens, until it pleases. And you need to save this kind of acting on these desires until you, in fact, get married. Okay? And so these are a couple of ways to fuel love. Prize your spouse above all others. Build security in your relationship. And then point 3, verses 8 through the rest of the chapter, cultivate flourishing love. Cultivate flourishing love. Now, for the rest of this chapter, we move into a real kind of love poem that compares their young love to springtime and the blossoming of the garden, the flourishing of the garden and the flowers of the field. And so let's read it together. It is really beautiful. She says, the voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, looking through the lattice. And I'll keep reading, but let's just stop there for a second and recognize that we're starting to now associate love with springtime. The winter's over, right? The cold days are over. It's warming up. The fields are turning green. The flowers are blossoming. You're smelling that grass smell, and you're hearing the birds chirp in the air. And it's this like picture of the earth waking up after being dormant over the winter. That's the way they're describing their love for each other in poetic terms. And he comes like a stag, right? Like a gazelle. And he's running for her. He's like making a beeline to get to her. It's like, I want to be with her. And there's some kind of physical barrier, maybe. It says, behold, he stands behind the wall, gazing through the windows. They just want to be together. And he's like, climbing, scouring to get to where she is and maybe even working around physical obstacles to get into the same space as her. He's going to overcome the barriers between him and her. And it goes on, and now she probably recounts what he has said to her. She knows this by heart. This is on her mind. These are the kinds of things that he says to her. This is the way he talks to her. She says about him, my beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my beautiful one. Notice how often he says that. And come away. For behold, the winter is past, and the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, and the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree ripens its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. They want to be together. Their love is like springtime, and they want to make sure that nothing spoils it, because it goes on in verse 14. He continues, according to her, oh, my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the crannies of the cliff. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. And so what he says in verse 14 there is, I want to get away with you. You come with me. Let's go. Let's go in the clefts of the rocks, right? Let's get somewhere in private where we can be together and we can talk. Now, we know he has more on his mind than just talking. He's going to be pretty clear about that. But in this verse, he wants to get alone with her so that he can talk. He wants to talk with her and get to know her. He wants to know who she is. He wants to continue exploring more about her and asking her questions and finding the answers and that discovery of getting to know each other and continuing to do so. That's what he wants. He wants to know her deeply, and he wants to work out the problems. He says, so you can see, I want to see your face and I want to hear your voice. And it's sweet to me. I want to hear you talk. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to listen. Please tell me more. And your face is lovely too, by the way. And then catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards. And this is kind of one of those verses where it's like, what does that mean? And I'm not a farmer. Grew up in Orange County, lots of concrete. I do try to grow vegetables and things, and little experience, but not with foxes personally. I guess foxes are nuisances. They get in and they tear up the crops. They ruin the garden. They spoil the produce. And he's like, we know that can happen in our relationship where we bring problems into the relationship, or problems arise in a relationship that threaten to spoil our love for each other. And so we need to catch the foxes. We need to identify the problems and hash them out. Let's talk through them. Let's keep the conversation going and not just look face to face and hear your voice, but let's even talk about the things that are problematic that we need to deal with. And it's striking that he says the foxes and the little foxes. I don't know. I don't want to read too much into it, but is it like there's big problems and there's little problems, and sometimes it's the smallest thing that just blows up in our relationships, right? And we end up fighting and arguing over the stupidest little thing, and it becomes a big argument over not the thing itself, but the way you talked. And man, these are little foxes. Let's catch those things. Let's root those out. We got to talk through it, hash through it, and overcome the problems, because we do bring them into the relationship. We find out about problems that we maybe didn't even know that we had when we get married and there's another person living with us. It just creates that friction and exposes our sin. You got to catch those foxes. When Bethany and I were dating, we could talk for hours. And we were just reminiscing on this the other day about what did we talk about? And we don't know. Couldn't remember, because we would talk for hours and hours and hours, and we just wanted to be together. We were in college together, and so we would go and study together, and of course I would get zero work done. My grades really dropped, but I got her. It was worth it. She could multitask and study and talk at the same time. She can talk and do a lot of things at the same time, okay? She's really good at multitasking, but we would just talk and get away and talk about anything and everything. Our very first date, we went and saw a movie and sat in the front row, and we were with two other couples, and we talked. We were that couple. We talked the entire movie. Sorry, it wasn't a good movie, so, I think it was like the Kingdom of Heaven. I don't know. Some movie, we didn't care about it, but we just talked the whole time. I don't know what we talked about, but we just couldn't get enough. And we wanted to get away, and be together. And we still talk, and it's still fun. And we still want to get away and be together. And we continue to learn new things about each other and cultivate our relationship. And we need to work hard to continue to talk to one another in romantic and special ways in our marriages. I don't know at what point that becomes more work than automatic. Early on, when we're dating, this is just like no one had to tell us, hey, you guys really need to go on a date. We were just going on dates anytime we could. No one had to tell us, hey, you need to talk to each other and get to, we were just doing that. At some point, you have to be a little bit more intentional. It's a little less automatic. And if you just drop that, if you just neglect that, then you drop this kind of flourishing love, and the spark that's there when you start dating and you're attracted to each other and you spend time with each other starts to fizzle. And we've got to work to bring that back. We've got to work to develop that. This can be a struggle. And so we need to work hard to talk and to listen, for us to continue opening up to our wives and telling, really thoughtfully answering the question how our day at work was and what we're thinking and what we're feeling. Those are things that we don't communicate to each other usually. Guys, how we're thinking and how we're feeling. Usually that kind of conversation is super minimal amongst the dudes, right? But with our wives, we need to open that door. We need to tell her what we're thinking and what we're feeling. We signed up for that. And one big way to hit this target and to move in this direction is to schedule dates in your life right now. I don't know when the last time you had a date night was. You don't need to tell me. But you should think about it right now. When was it for you? And if it was more than a week, you're due for another one. You need to go on a date with your spouse. You need to get away. You need to catch the foxes. You need to talk with each other. You can bring some language of verse 5 and verse 6. That's okay too. Got to make that happen. She goes on and kind of ends chapter 2. And she says, "My beloved is mine, and I am his. He grazes among the lilies. Until the day breathes and the shadows flee, turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the cleft mountains." And so here again is her response to him in the way he treats her and her words to her. In chapter 2, verse 2, he was the one providing for her, right? The apples of the apple tree, it's like providing for her, and she's sitting under his shade. Well, here, she's like, hey, you called me a lily earlier. Well, why don't you be like a gazelle and graze among the lilies, right? I'm here to provide for you now. And yeah, she's starting to get suggestive again. And then she says, all night until the shadows flee, until the day breathes. She's inviting him to come and be like a gazelle or a stag on the cleft mountains. And she's inviting him to her. And while, like I said, they haven't consummated the marriage yet, the cleft mountains, she's probably not referring to a geographical location. She's referring to her body. And, the cleft between the mountains, if you will. Like, I think the Hebrew word there is cleavage. And she says, I'm a lily, come and graze, right? And come explore among the mountains, right? Be like a gazelle and come between these mountains, right? And, man, she's talking to him. She wants him. And men, if you want your wife to speak to you this way, and I'll just say that we all do, right? Then you should treat her the way this man treats his wife in this passage and in this song. He woos her, he makes her feel safe and loved, He praises her in public. He provides for her. And he tells her that she's one in a million. You're a lily among the brambles. Isn't it great that God gave each and every one of us a spouse with whom that we can enjoy this kind of relationship? I mean, every single person in the room, you have a spouse. God's given you a person for you to talk like this with and to be with like this. And you may object and say that your relationship is, so far removed from this ideal, or you don't even know where to start, or it's such a long road ahead, or whatever. Well, you can start here. We just identified 3 points, right? Start here. Start with this chapter. Start with this verse. Start with these questions. And do what we talk about today in small groups. Take steps in the right direction. We need to work. God saw fit to give us this book and this poem and these, spicy words back and forth. And this can be difficult to develop this and grow in this sort of way. And, we were just talking with, our kids are in the thick of grammar school right now, and, they're learning, and it's hard. One of them was sitting at the table crying yesterday because math is hard. I'm like, dude, I get it, and it's just like, he doesn't know how to solve the problem. And that's exactly why it's exactly why you're in school. It's exactly why you're doing this assignment. If you knew how to solve the problem and you could do every assignment on the page, you'd be done. But you're not done. You've got stuff to learn. And so I just think, man, we need to adopt that mentality and not think, well, this is a lot of work. So, because what he wants to do is, this is a lot of work. I don't get it. I'm going to cry, and I just want to give up. Well, that's not an option for us. We made a covenant with our spouse, and that includes a resolve to work, to cultivate this kind of responsive love in our relationships. And that's a privilege and a responsibility that we get to enjoy by God's grace. And so let's talk about that in groups tonight and have a good discussion about it, okay? I'll pray, and you can go. God, we love you, and we thank you for our opportunity to study this book. Pray that we'd have a really good discussion about it all now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.